All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful class in biology, and in this case, a little bit of biology and philosophy of science. We're going to be expounding upon the unit on evolution because it has some implications for life that um, it feels a bit incomplete, one, because the evidence is carefully picked and chosen to support a particular view of reality, and two, um, it touches on philosophy and theology a little bit, so it bears some explanation and some investigation of things. So, this whole unit, we're going to be kind of looking at um, other perspectives and counter perspectives to the classical methodological naturalism, is what it is. But the classical matter is all there is view of existence that is so prevalent today and may or may not be true, right? So we'll look into that, why that may or may not be the case, and I'll try to be as objective as I can. Um, I am going to reveal my bias at this point. I am a theist, so I will be coming at this from that perspective, but that doesn't make it evil or not worth listening to, but I want you to know what my personal bias is. And this will probably be the one and only time that you'll hear this perspective on these topics, as all the way up through my university career, I never received this kind of talk. It was not until after university where I started reading books and talking to people that these sorts of perspectives were communicated to me. So I would like to intervene maybe a little early on in your life so that you don't go down the same paths that I did, and maybe you can find a quicker path to meaning and value in your life, in whichever system of belief that you choose, because it'll be an actual system of belief and not just something that you kind of accidentally got pulled into haphazardly. So with that in mind, we're going to start out today looking at other ideas about origins of life and why they matter. So the big questions for today, there's a couple. What do people believe about the origins of life, and how do these views affect life, like our personal life? It's a great question. Do they have any effect? Does what you believe do anything? Well, we're going to look into that in our new vocabulary, which hopefully you've gotten a little bit from your philosophy class. Is going to be theism, atheism, agnosticism, a review from our class, evolution via natural selection, theistic evolution, panspermia, or sometimes called guided panspermia, intelligent design, creation, special creation, and old earth creation. Okay, so a review vocabulary, which may or may not be truly review, is something called methodological naturalism. And this is an inherent assumption in science whereby matter, energy, and physical, visible phenomena are really the only things that you can investigate, because they're the only things that you can observe and experiment with. Things that are beyond the observable, by at least one definition of the word, are above or superior to nature, supernatural, not in the ghosts, God kind of sense, but they're outside of the physical realm and therefore not a part of science. And so methodological naturalism is a philosophical assumption that is done when people do science. And for the record, I don't think that science should change from that. I think this is a good assumption to have when attempting to do science. You should be doing science from this perspective. But you also need to know that when science is done, it is done with this assumption in mind. This is a precondition to doing science in a lot of cases. Well, in the last 200 years or so. So we're going to define a few things, and theism, broadly speaking, is the belief in some sort of god or gods that exist beyond this reality. Okay, maybe in another dimension, maybe outside of space and time, something other than the physical realm exists, and there is an intelligent mind or agent that is the cause of it. Okay, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, all of these are theistic in essence. And some branches of Buddhism that believe in reincarnation, you might actually qualify those as a type of theism as well, because they invoke things that are beyond the observable world, and therefore would be considered religious in the not strictly scientific kind of sense. Now, atheism is a positive commitment that there is in fact no God, or gods that have existed, or could possibly exist. Okay, and that's a philosophical or a lack of evidentiary commitment. Most atheists are kind of de facto atheists. They maybe haven't had any revelation that God exists, and therefore they just assume that he doesn't. But it's really difficult to posit an absolute negative. This is very introductory philosophy. And to say with 100% certainty that no God exists, you would essentially have to be God, because you'd have to know everything. So they just are de facto, they choose not to believe in God, right? Not that they can prove that he doesn't exist, they just choose not to believe in him, and the way they see the world, they don't see or don't acknowledge any evidence for the existence of God. Now, agnosticism comes from some Greek words, but is essentially the idea that we can't know, right? That some evidence may point to the existence of a god or gods. Some evidence might point to a random reality that just happened to come into existence. We don't know, and we'll probably never know, right? That would be an agnostic point of view. And agnosticism is kind of a philosophical point of view where nothing can really be known. It's kind of, it's an interesting type of belief system that's kind of written into the fabric of culture today, where, there's no real truth, right? It's all personal truth. That would be under agnosticism. It's just kind of what you can discover through life's experiences. Truth in an objective sense maybe doesn't even exist at all to be found, and we might not have any way of ever finding it. Now, evolution by natural selection, we spent a lovely unit studying, and I did my very best to teach it from the book's perspective so that you had the arguments for evolution completely not tainted by my personal bias. I did my best to do that. But this is the idea that all of life arose via natural processes. It might even extend into cosmic evolution. So the Big Bang gave rise to the abiogenesis, the first life, and the first life diversified into us eventually. So purely naturalistic explanation. This refers specifically to the evolution of living organisms via random mutation and natural selection, and is what Darwin proposed, and what we learned about for the last 4 modules. Now, theistic evolution is something you may have never heard of before, and this is a belief in evolution that is guided by God or gods, right? So there is some sort of supernatural stacking of the deck that had perhaps humans as the end goal in mind. So all of the specialness of the universe and the specialness of Earth and the uniqueness of humanity was set up by an intelligent mind and then allowed to happen with perhaps minimal intervention, if any intervention. And so it is a religious belief system that just incorporates the theory of evolution and does not attempt to have any disagreement with it. And to be fair, I was for a very long time a theistic evolutionist. So I think it's a very valid view of things. If you happen to be a theist, I don't think there's any real difficulty there, because it's the difference between having a pool table where you put the balls right in front of each ball socket so that they can easily be knocked in, or setting the balls and then hitting it with a cue, and then all lining up just perfect to be hit in as if you had just set it up. Either way, it's pretty, impressive. And in fact, getting the necessary preconditions that had us at the end in mind without any kind of intervention is probably more impressive than just setting things up by default. So I don't think anything is taken away from the idea of God or gods with evolution in a theistic sense. In fact, belief that God set up the universe to produce us solves some of the, I'll say, mathematical or statistical issues that I have with the evolutionary process in terms of random mutation and natural selection that don't seem to jive with what we're finding in biology. Now, panspermia, or sometimes called guided panspermia, is the idea that the first life didn't arise from a primordial soup. There was no abiogenesis, it came here from somewhere else. And guided panspermia is the idea that aliens perhaps have intervened in the history of this Earth to make sure that life continued and diversified in a specific kind of way. How they would have inserted themselves and in what means by which they would have guided, unknown, maybe lost history. But certainly the idea that the preconditions for the first cell maybe didn't exist on Earth, but could have potentially existed somewhere else. I mean, that's kind of what this idea is coming from, because a great many scientists look at the origin of life research and find it to be, how can I put this? Very handsy, we'll say. Most of the research that's done is done in the laboratory with a lot of human intervention to get just a few chemical steps to go forward. And we'll talk about this more later. And so the idea of panspermia, that the first cell didn't come about on the early Earth because the conditions just maybe weren't perfect, which they would really have to be, but rather came from some other place where life had longer to develop, or maybe was created by a different type of life. That's what that is. That's panspermia or guided panspermia. Now, intelligent design is kind of a intermediate between a theistic view and an atheistic worldview, because it's just a minimal commitment that some aspects of reality and life are best explained by an intelligent cause, right? So guided panspermia, aliens intervening to guide the development of life on Earth, falls under intelligent design, right? But also theism falls under intelligent design as well. So you can be an atheist and still believe in intelligent design, at least as far as life goes. I don't know about the origin of the universe, but I suppose the universe as well, if you're talking about simulation theory, which we'll have a fun video on. So yes, both the universe and the origins of living things can be approached from an intelligent design perspective, and you still be completely atheistic or agnostic. But it also fits pretty well with theism as well. So it's kind of a bridge to try to get in my perspective, a bridge to kind of get two groups of people who have differing core beliefs to be able to work harmoniously together. All right, so creationism, I'm going to put under theism as a really broad term that's talking about all creation myths. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Japanese myth of the goddess crying into the ocean and the islands being born, any creation story that exists would be under creationism, right? Some God or gods created it. Special creation, I'm going to define as just the Christian religious 7 days of creation, which I'm probably never going to talk about again. But I differentiate these two because there's, some specifics that people who are Christians might hold to. And then Old Earth creationism, which is an attempt to reconcile the special creation as described in the Bible with the 7 days as 7 ages, so that you have long periods of time for life to develop. And this would kind of fit well with a theistic evolutionary perspective and a very old Earth. So this one tends to assume that the Earth is young. This one accepts the scientific data that suggests the Earth is very, very old, and life as well is very old, and attempts to reconcile it with Bible verses that say a day is as 1,000 years unto the Lord, right? So ages of creation instead of days of creation. And so if you look at these terms, this is kind of how they're organized together. You have atheism on the left, we'll say. Agnosticism would be somewhere in the middle. Theism on the right. Intelligent design, again, includes panspermia or guided panspermia, theistic evolution, and then the broader scope of creation stories, which can be subdivided into special creation and old earth creation. And then, of course, on the left side, you would have your cosmic evolution, and then your molecular evolution to abiogenesis, and then evolution by natural selection all the way to you. And that's kind of how these would be all put together. And I think that's enough for a first introductory lecture. We're going to have 3 today, I believe, or 3 in this class, not today, but in this lesson. So thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next lecture.